We now proceed to our next speaker, which is Danko Nikolic. He's a dedicated researcher who has a strong passion for closing the gap between the mind and the brain. Throughout his academic career, he has concentrated on figuring out the physical processes within our neurons that give rise to conscious experience and cognitive functions, and has worked at prestigious institutions like Max-Planck-Institut for Brain Research, the Frankfurt Institute for Advanced Studies, and the University of Zagreb. He studies both the top-down analysis of behavior and subjective experiences and the bottom-up examination of brain physiology using a comprehensive methodology. He has written extensively, has had many media apparitions, and without further ado, Danko Nikolic, everyone.
Hello, everyone. Maybe I start with a question. How many people in the room believe that one day robots could become as conscious as we humans are? Okay, some, not many. And how many people believe never? A few more hands. Okay, that's very nice. That's a good start, a baseline for my talk. Because what I will tell you about is my work on trying to improve, first, artificial intelligence from neuroscience. So I'm both neuroscientist and an artificial intelligence person. I did both for a living. And I want to use neuroscience to improve AI. And somewhere on the way, I realized that if we really want to do that, then, and really bring robots to the level of intelligence of humans, we also have to bring them on the way at the level of consciousness of humans. In other words, we use consciousness to be intelligent. The reason why we are so intelligent is that we are conscious. We think through stuff. We experience the world. This helps us make more intelligent decisions. Right? So I will explain to you this new paradigm that I have devised based on neuroscience, which can be applied for artificial intelligence. But since this is a consciousness event, I want to tell this story through the story of consciousness, and particularly to the story of phenomenal experience, like the hard problem of consciousness. So the one who got me interested in this is David Chalmers. I'm sure most people know who this person is. So a reminder, him and other philosophers have basically pointed out to neuroscientists and to AI people, look, there is a discrepancy between what you guys are explaining in the brain on one side and what actually happens within our minds. We have phenomenal experiences and the machines don't, and also your explanations of the brain do not have any possibility to explain phenomenal experiences. So there is a big discrepancy. So his idea was like, we have easy problems in neuroscience. So finding neural correlates, like things that correlate to conscious, explaining information processing and so on. But then there is the hard problem, and the hard problem is the phenomenal experience, right? The experience of red color, the experience of sadness. How is that possible to get, right? So one way of thinking about it is that, yes, there is a discrepancy. And the other way of thinking about it is that there is something fundamentally wrong at the beginning where we start explaining how the brain works and how we build artificial intelligence. There is something fundamentally different in the brain than what we thought it was, right? So here is what we want to achieve in machines and what we want to explain. This is the darkness. So David Chalmers asked in his paper, why is it not happening? Why is it all not happening in dark for us? Why do we have this, the light? So something lights up when we wake up in the morning, or when we are born, or when we learn something, when we have a new idea, things start lighting up. So why does this happen? There's another popular way of explaining it. The problem that I'm going to talk about, we have neurons here, and we have consciousness, and this magic step, we don't get it. We cannot connect it. So my idea is that something here we got wrong. And I'm going to explain to you what that is. How I think we should get this right. But to do that, I want to do first a thought experiment. This is Leonardo da Vinci. He lived 500 years ago. And he was arguably the smartest person, one of the smartest person in the world for sure, and arguably the smartest world in the person. It's very important that he's smart for my story, and it's very important that he lived 500 years ago. So here goes the thought experiment. You somehow time travel, or more of us time travel with our phones back to Italy, where he lived, and we show him our phones and the Facebook. And I, take a picture and send it, and then shows up here another person. Another person writes a note and shows up at the third person. And we keep communicating to each other while walking on the hills of vineyards where he lived. He would be puzzled. He would be totally puzzled. He may have been, at that time, the smartest person. He knew everything that there was to know. He couldn't explain it. For him, this is as magical as consciousness for us. Right? So what I want to look at is, what does it take to explain to Leonardo da Vinci how phones and Facebook work? To have a full, complete story that he will be satisfied. Oh, now I understand. And kind of go back and after that and look what are we missing? Are we basically in Leonardo's position in terms of consciousness? Right? So here's my list of what we need to explain to him. We have to explain to him the website. But then we cannot explain it because we have to go and explain what is internet. We cannot explain that because he doesn't know what a computer is. We cannot explain the computer because he doesn't know what a microchip is. And he doesn't know what Boolean logic is, or telephone, and telescreen, and a light bulb. He'd never seen light bulb. He'd never heard of electricity. So we have to go back, start from the beginning, and start again. So we need an explanation roadmap. So I will give you explanation roadmap for Leonardo, and then I will give you my similar explanation roadmap for qualia, for phenomenal experiences. We need a starting point. So what is the basic starting point we would have for Leonardo? Probably electromagnetism. If we really want to explain that he understands really well, and remember, he is a really smart person. He doesn't have the knowledge, but he is a freaking genius. He can figure it out. He will understand it. So we explain electromagnetism, spend a few hours, days, weeks. Then we go and explain electricity. Easy. Then we go explain how telephone works, the first telephone. Then how you can make a TV screen. Then a microchip. Then we go explain computer program. He would enjoy probably all of that, learning all of that. And then we can explain internet. Then we can explain website. Then we can explain Facebook. And then he goes, oh, yeah, now it's clear. Now it's been explained. And 500 years of development of technology and knowledge and science from mankind condensed here. Now, there is also one interesting thing, which I called walk-alone point. Since he's a really smart person, no matter how smart he is, he couldn't start from probably, even if he explained electromagnetism, he couldn't figure it out. Yeah, here, that's how it works. He still needs some explanation, some help. But at some point, he could walk alone mentally and do explanations. It's probably somewhere around the internet. Once we start explaining internet, then he would go, then you got this and this and this and that. I got it. So maybe the last two steps we don't really need to explain to him. That will also be important. So I hope this makes sense. Now, let's have an explanation. I will now show you the similar explanation roadmap that I laid down for phenomenal experiences. And I will then later walk you a little bit through these steps. So I will start with something that's called gates. That's a new concept in neuroscience. It's a new proposal. And I will explain this as a fundamental idea. Whatever the electromagnetism was for Leonardo, that my proposal is for us, for our level of knowledge today, what we need to do as the first step is understand the gating in neural networks. Once we get that, then from that we have to understand how these gates are organized in a global workspace. Then we have to go back and understand brain connectivity, which we know. Anatomically, we know these facts, but we don't understand really why the brain is connected exactly this way it is. Then we can go and explain to ourselves semantics, so how we conceptualize things, how we abstract things. Then we can do something like explaining the qualities of experience, not yet explaining full experience, but where the qualities come from, like the redness of red. And then the final step is observing these qualities, and then we have qualia. That's a roadmap. And what I will do now, I will focus on the first step. I will spend most of the time on the first step, and the other steps I will brush off. They're not completely done. I'm not completely finished, so you're not going to get a full explanation of how qualia works today. But I hope you will get some idea in which direction I propose we should go. Right? So, what are these gates? The electromagnetism for Facebook. What is this gating in neural networks in the brain? So, the classical paradigm that we all know, that we all learned in textbooks, is that there is a network that produces cognition. There's a network of neurons. They have connections. They have electrical states. They have voltages. And our thoughts are basically these computations, these voltages. The result of thinking is certain state of voltages of neurons. Some neurons are excited, other inhibited, hyperpolarized, depolarized. That's the thought. The second part of the classical paradigm is the learning mechanisms. So the learning mechanisms have to teach the network, train the network, get the connections right, so that the network can think and process. That's the classical paradigm. And it has basically two big sets of mechanisms. Right? Why is that important? Because, okay, so as I said before, it's impossible to explain qualia with the current paradigm, or it's very hard. We did not succeed. We tried really hard. But connectionism, synapses, neural activation, so far that didn't work. Right? So maybe a new paradigm is needed. So here's the new paradigm. I said we had two mechanisms. I pulled them apart, and I will introduce a third mechanism that we kind of missed out. And we know it exists in the brain. That there is actually physiological evidence it exists. We kind of just ignored it because we couldn't put it together, what to do with it. Right? So, and that's the gates. And it sits in between. That's also important to understand. It sits in between. So learning mechanisms train gates, and then gates affect the network. And we have the third box. And this third box is important. If somebody wants to understand a little bit more of these dynamics of multi-level interactions, I recommend this paper, which is my paper from 2015. But I have to warn you, it's very, very not so easy to understand. It's a very conceptual paper. Later, I will tell you about easier paper to understand. That come later. Now, so how do these gates work? Right? What is this? What is the gates? In a classical paradigm, we think of a neuron like this. It has some inputs. It has some synapses. The inputs are in some way summed up. There is some transfer function. There's output. That's how we think about a neuron. It could be simpler. It could be more complex. It could be very complex system with Hodgkin-Huxley equations, with compartments, and so on. But the idea is basically still the same. Inputs, sum up, output. Now, the new paradigm says, yeah, we have all that, plus we have something like transient selection of pathways. So the same neuron has here, for example, two different states, where it basically decided to close some of its dendritic branches, some of its connections, or some of its output wires, and keep open the others. So it has gates on the connections that keep making these decisions for the neuron. And these gates are smart. I said you have to learn. The learning mechanisms have to train these gates to be smart enough to make right decisions at right time. The gates may be observing what's happening, which kind of inputs the neuron is coming, maybe other inputs, other neurons in the vicinity, and then making decisions. And that's what we are missing. This is our electromagnetism. Important is that gate states are robust. They're more robust than the electric states of the neurons. Electric states of the neurons change like this. They just washed away immediately. Like 20 milliseconds is really long time for voltages. Whereas the gates can stay for half a second, some even minutes. So they are relatively robust. And many of them cannot be closed. Most of them cannot be closed anymore by force, but they just spontaneously go back to the previous default state. So I mentioned also that there is real neurophysiological mechanism. There are multiple ones, but I think the most prominent one is the metabotropic receptors, which you see here, and the G-protein-gated ion channels, which you see here. So basically, how would that work? This is the membrane, and this is the outside part. So you have some activity here, and then you have neurotransmitters in the extracellular space. They bind here on the metabotropic receptor, which then signals either directly through G protein or second messenger, and then could be another pathway. These things are complex. But anyway, the signal comes here and opens or closes this channel. This is the G protein-gated ion channel. And this is the channel that stays then open or closed for seconds or maybe minutes. And this is what we think with. So that's the basic change in the paradigm. We don't think with voltages. We think with states of these channels. When we have a new idea, new set of channels are open and closed. When we have a new conclusion, these channels change their states. The voltages, of course, are there. They are passing information through and activity is coming. But the voltages are just support, are just the basic flow of information. They're like telephones for us. And these are like real decision makers, the real thinking mechanisms. So, and there is a paper that came out this year that you may want to read if you want to learn more about it. Now, what's now different, really different, about how we should think about neural networks when they have these gates? So in the classical paradigm, the output of here's the input, and there's connections, there's synaptic connections, weights, and there's some output. So in the classical paradigm, we think as output is the result of cognition. Whatever comes out in terms of spikes, action potentials, that's the result of cognition. But in the new paradigm, the network, while producing output, is also changing its states. And it's actually these new states that are the result of cognition. What are then the outputs for? The outputs are for action, for our behavior. So whatever we do, whatever we say, comes through the electrical activity, which eventually is connected to muscles, makes our muscles move, makes me move, speak, and so on. Right? So we have basically separation on behavior and the cognition. And of course, they're connected, interconnected, right? So the states decide how we will act, but the actual actions are then happen through the voltages. Right? So that's what we think. I already mentioned that the gates are smart, that they need to be trained, much like weights are being trained. That's the only way this thing can work. Right? Now, here's I mentioned as a second step in this outline of the explanation, we have to understand the global workspace. So here's one slide about how we need to start thinking about the global workspace. classical paradigm tells us that we have stages of processing. We have input, and then because the output of a neuron has to be the voltage, you have to pass it to the next stage, and you have to pass it to the next stage. That's how you have to organize things according to classical paradigm to start working. That's how we build artificial intelligence solutions. Deep learning, you've heard of deep learning. Why is it called deep? Because it has many of such layers. That's the depth, right? And also in the brain explanations, we have similar explanations. For example, in vision, we start from V1, and here, detecting edges, and then other brain areas are detecting more complex combinations of visual features and so on. In the new paradigm, everything happens much more parallel. So these connections on the left are not very important. The connections on the right, the subcortical connections, are much more important. So the idea is that you have stages that from outside look similarly to these on the left, but actually they happen for the brain as a whole. So the whole brain goes in a cycle of changing its gates until it finally figures out, for example, in perception, what is it that I'm seeing, right? So if in this room suddenly a pink elephant appears, so in the first round, the brain would say, oh, there's something big. And the entire brain would just notice something big. Then it would go through a new round with the external world, new inputs from the external world, and these changes made by something big would affect new perception. Oh, this could be some animal. That's the second round. Then again, goes out, in from outside world information, and the whole brain goes, oh, this could be an elephant. And then the whole brain goes, but it's pink. And the whole brain goes, well, it's a pink elephant. So it's, in the classical paradigm, you would go somehow like this. Something big, maybe an animal, blah, 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 blah. Here you go in the whole thing goes in and around. So very different way of thinking how the whole thing works, how the global workspace of gates works. That's the paper I was mentioning, so you can read it. This one is much better understandable than the other one. So back to the explanation chain. So for gates, I said we need metabotropic receptors and G-protein gated ion channels. These are really tongue twisters. We need some better names for them. That's why I call them gates. Then we have global workspace, iterative rewiring, declogging, something I didn't mention, but what happens when you use the gates, it seems, is that you're basically declogging the network. What does it mean? In the brain you have, one neuron would be connected to two different neurons that do opposite things. Let's say for moving your hand, you have flexor and extender. And you have some neuron projecting on both, flexor and extender. So if you project on both equally, nothing would happen because they would conflict each other. That's clogging. So you have to unclog this connection. How do you unclog? The idea is that you unclog by states of the gates. Now, it's not only flexor extenders that are clogged. Everything in the brain is clogged. Everything's multi-overconnected for simple tasks that we do at a particular moment in time. We have way too much stuff going on. So we have to shut it off a lot. So that's the unclogging. Then we understand the brain connectivity. So there is one concept in neuroscience, especially for peripheral parts of neuroscience, called corollary discharge. And that's basically what happens is that when your local circuit executes some reflex, the circuit also sends extra signal up to the brain, which is called corollary signal, like on a side, to know that's what I'm doing right now. Right? So the idea with this brain connectivity anatomy is that we can explain anatomy of the brain as a kind of corollary discharges happening everywhere, all the time. Even between brain areas, they send to each other color early discharges of what they're doing. And that's why brain areas are connected to each other, just to inform each other what they are doing, and not to provide them with information like in the classical paradigm. Then we have semantics. So if we had all this explained, I didn't explain this completely. I'm just giving you some ideas of how I think we should go. Then, if we, then the next step, we can start working on semantics. Right? So semantics, basically, the key problem is how do we get concepts in that system? Right? And of course, there is not one or a few of the gates. There are millions, billions of gates. They're small molecules, they're everywhere. So when you have some input coming in, it would activate millions of gates. If these gates are trained properly to be activated, not activated, they together can form a concept. And by forming a concept, they basically form an attractor of behavior of the future changes. So once you have made these changes, new stimulus coming, it's coming on top of these changes. So there's a certain type of attractor. It's directing in which direction it could go. And this is what concepts do to us. Once we train well these gates, then we have very good control of where our brain can go next in its changes. And these are, of course, transient attractors because they last for a few seconds, maybe a minute, die off. Then we can start explaining qualities, not yet qualias, just qualities. And the idea is, I'll just throw an idea without any hope that I will convince you and without any hope that I will actually explain it well, because there's still work to be done. But the basic idea is that once you have these concepts, you could have multiple ones activated, and they start sometimes competing with each other. So one is pushing on this direction, the other one is pushing on this direction. Maybe it's a pink elephant. No, maybe it's just a big flamingo. There's a flamingo concept, there's an elephant concept. They're fighting together. Out of this fight, out of this competition, which happens in this global workspace that I just explained, comes out the quality. So the quality that will eventually maybe experience is the quality of this interaction, the quality of this competition between them. I hope this helps. And then finally, this doesn't make conscious experience yet. It's just happening somewhere, nobody's paying attention. Still, the system is making some decisions, but maybe nobody's paying attention to it, so there's no really conscious experience yet. So you need conscious experience, and then we need also to train and learn things like recall, the ability to relive experiences, to compare things, elephants versus flamingos. Names are very good here, to have naming. So when you have an internal word for something, it's much easier to evoke a concept. Associating things, and so on. So when we have these things here quite elaborate, then we can actually really experience these qualities. But the qualities are generated already very early. Without that, just everything we do have these qualities. So, even worms, when they are, digging holes, they may have different attractors. I don't want to call them concepts, but they may have different attractors. They may be feeding, or they may be foraging, or they may be running away from a predator. They may be mating. And two of them could be activated at the same time, and one has to win. Right? Should I be eating, or should I be running away? Is this situation dangerous, or is it good time to eat? And they have to kind of negotiate. And that's where their qualities come from. But they don't have anything to watch to it, to experience it, and to observe it, to recall, relive, compare, and so on. Okay, and I had this walk alone point. Right? So Back to Leonardo, right? So we are, as Leonardo's pretty much here, and wondering how does this come about, right? And if that's the chain of explanations, it's a really hard chain, and it's really hard to just see it right there. It's really, really hard work to get it. It took 500 years to get from Leonardo to Facebook. I think this will take much less. It's also a shorter chain than the other one. But it's still, this is the reason why it looks like magic. Not because it's magic, but because it's just too far away in the explanatory chain. And we need to just go through these steps. And each step is a lot of work. Each step is a lot of work. But if we get to qualities of experience, if we can explain that, then I think it's a walk-along point for everyone who is generally educated with the state of the knowledge of today. Because we all know what recall is and what comparison is like. We've done it all our lives and have all the experiences with it. So that's a hard work is to this point, and then we can walk alone. Right? But I hope we have a good starting point. Right? So that's the first paper I mentioned that you may want to read, the hard one, deeply philosophical one. That was mentioned today that we need to combine philosophy with neuroscience, and whoever enjoys that, please go here, read this paper. I also, repeat this. So I hope that this, the magic arrow is not magic, it's just a long arrow, it's a long chain of arrows, right? It's just not magic, it's too long a chain to see how you get there. And this is my last slide, and it's something that I have never seen any scientist to present ever, but that's what I decided kind of to orient myself. This is like my, whoops, sorry, how do I go back? Oh, here. This is like my scientific life. This is, on the left in blue is what I've done so far, and white is what I would like to do in the rest of my life. So what you see in the left is like this part here is my work at the Max-Planck-Institut, which you could describe as just standard neuroscience research, right? And then I developed this theory, which then helped me to come up with new ideas of doing something completely new. And my primary interest, as I said at the beginning, is actually artificial intelligence, developing new, better forms of artificial intelligence. And these are kind of papers and texts that you can find and read, and that all come from here. And are all going towards a direction how to build artificial intelligence that is very similar to our intelligence, that can reach similar levels of intelligence. And as you have seen now, it will have gates. It will have a lot of gates. Right? And this is what I would like to do here. So write a paper or book or something on how strong AI should work. I call it strong AI. Then another problem is how to train. Like how it works is one way, but how to actually train it, how to build it is another. So this is like where I'm heavy focused. And qualia is kind of a side effect of this whole thing in my private work. But it's really interesting. And the one who made me think about it was David Charms. He personally, I had interaction with him, and he explained to me what he thought and where the problems are, and I was fascinated, and I totally thought, yeah, that's something we have to think about as well. All right, so consciousness is hard. Qualia is hard. I hope, yeah, we all agree, but not impossible. Hopefully not impossible. So I hope you learned something.
For sure we did. Thank you very much, Danko. Do we have any question from the public? Any raised hands? Please. The microphone will come to you.
What is your opinion about the existence of free will?
Provocative question. So, I think that completely free will does not exist. It's all materially, physically, consequentially determined. And yet, at the level of our consciousness, we can act as if we have the free will. So, because wherever our consciousness reaches, we can make subjectively free decision. And there's, of course, some border and something behind that we cannot consciously understand, relate. And this may determine our behavior, but we don't consciously see it determining. So we will always perceive it as our will as free. It will never be free, but it doesn't matter. It's a good subjective feeling that we have a free will, and I think I came here on my free will. Probably I didn't. I was forced by organizers.
Well, hopefully not to that extent. We have another question posted in the chat. So the competition among concepts through qualities results from different transient attractors. How does one win over the other? So,
how?
So the competition, it was a question. The competition among concepts through qualities results from different transient attractors, and how does one win over the other?
How does one win over the other?
Yes.
Okay, good question. I have some picture in my head how, but I don't have a really good explanation. Well, the winning will depend on the future interaction. The future interaction always depends on the environment. You are still interacting with the environment. So they are both kind of making some guesses and hypotheses of what would be the best way of winning, what would be the best strategy of winning, but then the sensory inputs or results of your actions actually give the information who will win. Right? So let's say here's something pink, round. So is it a big flamingo? Is it a pink elephant? So I look around, I get more information. So and one loses, the other one wins. In this example, it would be the pink elephant would win. Right? So it's always it's with the environment. So they both have partial knowledge about the surrounding world, and the surrounding world keeps feeding more information, more changes. And at the end, it's an interaction between the surrounding world and the internal. As we heard today in a previous talk about 4 E's, the 4 E's apply here. All 4 of them apply in this loop. Right? I hope this answers your question. Well, no, this question, well, not yours. Somebody's question.
Are there any other questions? There, sir.
Hello, it's not really a question, but a request for comment. If we look at your graphics with the stages starting from gates, transient gates, and so on, so building like from electromagnetism to Facebook, I think this really applies to AI and robots. And I understand why you started your lecture with asking us about robots. I really don't see how it's so relevant to humans, because if we talk about humans, then I don't know, I taste an apple and it tastes some way to me, and it depends. I don't know if I'm upset, if I ate, if I'm in a good mood, and so on. If I look at the sunset, it's the same thing. So these things are not captured in that chart. Of course, we can talk, you can interpret this as attractors or so on. But there is no concept of inside perception or self, or we can call it in any way. That's why I'm saying it seems to apply only to AI in a very good way to AI. I mean, you can really use this to build next levels of AI. But how does it really concern with things like human conscience or self or whatever? Thank you.
Okay, I think I understood the question. And I agree, I didn't say anything about that. And this could apply not only to AI, it could apply to not only to humans. This applies also maybe to animals, maybe to bees, to plants as well. But I think what I have proposed is a basic explanatory tool, mechanism. But you have to then fill it up at different places with human-specific stuff. Right? So, like, let's say we have emotions. So we could have somewhere in this hierarchy, so where's amygdala? It has, and it will be at multiple places. It will have some connectivity. It will have some role in the global workspace. It will have its own gates. It will have some play in the concepts. But you could also take out amygdala and put something else in it. Right? So to explain actually concretely human behavior and to be a psychologist, that's not enough. You have to fill this up with anatomy, with physiology, with all kinds of stuff. Right? So what I'm offering is like kind of just an explanatory skeleton that requires lots of work to fill up, to explain like why humans do that, why humans do wars, right? This doesn't explain why humans do wars and why humans then help each other after the war. It's confusing completely. But I think to fully explain that, we need this basic skeleton. It's like, you know, it's like let's go to Leonardo. So we explained the electromagnetism website and so on. I didn't explain concrete website. I didn't explain concrete computer or concrete programming language. That would be more similar to your question, like how about humans? That's a concrete implementation of this chain. Hope this helps.
Thank you. Any other question from the public? There is one.
Oops, I didn't hear everything.
So your question at the beginning about robots, what do you think? What's your answer about this?
Whether they can be conscious?
Yes.
Definitely, they can be conscious. They must be conscious if you want to achieve some higher level of intelligence. But, there's a big but, we can have a full control what they're conscious of. Right? Because, as we just discussed, like what you're going to fill up in. If you don't have amygdala in there, if you don't have release of hormones and everything that happens during emotion, that they are not going to have emotions, or they're going to have limited emotions, right? Or you can make them always happy, always satisfied, or always angry. I don't know why would you do that, but you can. So, yeah, they would need to be conscious, but they will be conscious. Probably we would decide. Engineers will decide to make them conscious of different things and be, you know, more to do service to humans, to mankind, and not to be problematic. Right? But they will be conscious.
That's great news. Thank you.
There seems to be a question there.
I have some kind of philosophical question. Why do we eager to share our monopoly for consciousness with artificial intelligence?
I didn't hear that. Why do we have to share?
Why do we eager to share our monopoly for consciousness with artificial intelligence?
Why are we eager to share? But
because you wrote about strong intelligence, i.e.,
Yeah.
In the last slide.
But I don't know if somebody is really eager to share it. I think it's a necessity if we want to have artificial intelligence smart enough to do everything we would like it to do. And so imagine you buy in a few years a home robot that takes care of your home. And so this robot would have to understand lots of needs that emerge in a household. Right? And not everything can be pre-trained with examples. That's what we do today. Today's technology requires everything that will happen to have examples already trained. You cannot really extrapolate, just a little tiny bit. Right? But if you wanted to extrapolate, that we will need to conclude in a way similar to our consciousness. Right? And you don't want to have this robot and walk it around every time and show it like, this is how you do this, this is how you do this, this is how you put this, clean up this mess. You just want to say, clean up this mess, that's it. But how is the robot going to understand that what is mess and what is not mess? It has to kind of think in a similar way like we do. It has to feel the mess. It has to have the quality of mess. Oh, that's ugly. Oh, I need to get rid of that. If it doesn't have this quality, it cannot infer what is mess. It cannot infer what a human would like to be cleaned and what the human masters would like to stay as it is. Right? So, if you don't have that, you end up programming it step by step like we do today, and it's no good. It doesn't really bring us where we would like to be. So I think it's a necessity if we want to bring it up. I'm not sure I don't know that anyone wants to do it just for the sake of it. Maybe some art project, I don't know.
And there is a question there.
Yes, I'm not sure I am correct, but you seem to assume that humans can be explained by what happens in the brain and in their biology, and thus completely ignoring any spiritual or energetic additional dimension to the human being, which of course can explain why humans do this or that. I mean, you seem to, everything is based on logic and physical things you see. Hmm? So am I right, you are ignoring it? If yes, do you have a reason why you ignore it? You would ignore such a dimension.
So, could you repeat just the last part? I didn't hear the last part. And where are you? Can you wave?
Over here? Back.
In the back.
In front of you.
In the back, Danko. In the back.
I'll stand here, and then please repeat just the last part.
Okay, basically, are you ignoring such a spiritual and energetic dimension of the human being completely in this view of things, or not? Or you are just not thinking of it because you have no way of addressing it with the mind?
I see. I think we can explain spiritual parts with material parts. That's how I think we should do. We don't need extra explanation to explain everything that we today think as spiritual, right? So let's go back to Leonardo. If Leonardo sees this magic with phones and Facebook, he may be inclined to look up in the sky and say, like, oh, God brought you. Right. God created it. But then you go back and explain, okay, pure physics, don't really need God to explain it. So I think we can do the same with spiritual aspects.
But you may be wrong, that is clear to you.
Yeah, of course, I may be wrong with all of it,
right.
But
You sounded so convinced.
Yeah, I could be wrong, and you could be right if you think differently. I'm just telling you what I think.
Do we have more questions? I'm not sure whether we have more time for more questions. So, Florin is there with the microphone.
I would like to take my chance.
Okay, for sure.
Okay, so I agree that AI can become conscious, but we still have the Westworld problem. Does it have free will? Because if we build AI with physicalist, like physics works, we can get something that is really conscious if it also has input from the external reality. But we still have a measurement problem. Consciousness is causing stuff to collapse, and AI in this case is stuff that collapses. So is it measuring reality, or consciousness is measuring reality? That's why it is not conscious in the way humans are, because our consciousness started from the beginning, and AI is information in this present moment.
Well, that's 3 or 4 questions. I lost the first one now. Can we go one by one? Can you pick one of them? Which one is the most important to you?
So.
Sorry. Or maybe I could just improvise a little bit. So what was the first question? The first question, I thought I had a good answer. I cannot remember the first question. If AI would have free will. It wouldn't really have a free will, but it would feel like it has a free will. Exactly like we do. So it would say yeah, I decided to do that. I had a choice between cleaning this mess in this way or that way. So it has chosen to clean this way. It kind of optimized maybe a little better, a little less mess this way. But it actually didn't have free will, because in the background it was made such that it always cleans the mess. It just feels like it's my free will to clean the mess. But it was made in a robot factory to clean messes. And it loves cleaning messes. It enjoys doing that. It's built to enjoy cleaning messes, right? And similar like us, we don't have really a free will to have babies, although we kind of think we have a free will, but it's actually a program to have babies and for the species to continue. Right? And we also are programmed for some other things that are not so nice, but that's how we are. And within this, all the pressures inside us, we make some decisions that kind of appear as if we have the free will. It will be the same with robots, I think.